The smell hit me first, hot grease and ozone, the metallic tang of 1,000 welding torches firing in sequence. Munich's Siemens industrial complex was a cathedral of noise, and I, Mason Lancaster, had just spent 6 years as one of its priests. 70-hour weeks, overtime that bled into holidays. My hands still bore the calluses from steel beams and blueprints, my back the memory of crawling through concrete skeletons in sub-zero weather. But it was over. My supervisor had stamped my exit papers that morning, and now, 23 hours later, I was standing on American soil with a suitcase full of worn work clothes and a heart full of one singular thought. Mom. Diana Lancaster. 58 years old. The woman who worked double shifts as a hospital orderly after Dad died in a construction accident when I was 12. The woman who used to sit with me and Gavin by the fireplace, reading us stories even when her feet were so swollen she could barely walk. I'd sent nearly every paycheck home for 6 years. $2,000 a month like clockwork. I'd bought her a house before I left, a modest 3-bedroom on a quiet street where she could retire in peace, tend a garden, maybe finally rest. The taxi pulled up to the address I'd memorized, and I threw cash at the driver without counting it. Late afternoon sun filtered through the oak trees lining the street, casting long shadows across the pavement. I grabbed my suitcase and stepped out, my breath catching. The house was wrong. I stood frozen at the gate, my excitement curdling into something cold and sharp. The simple wooden gate I'd installed myself, the one with the hand-painted address numbers Mom loved because it has character, Mason, was gone. In its place stood a reinforced steel barrier with a sleek biometric keypad, the kind you'd see at a corporate office. 4 surveillance cameras perched on the fence posts like predatory birds, rotating smoothly, tracking my every movement with red blinking eyes. My mother, Diana Lancaster, was terrified of technology. She still used a flip phone because smartphones talked back to her. She once unplugged the microwave because the beeping made her nervous. She called my laptop the thinking machine and refused to touch it. This woman did not install a digital fortress around her home. Maybe Gavin helped her, I muttered, trying to calm the unease crawling up my spine. Maybe the neighborhood got rough. But I didn't believe it. The cameras swiveled toward me like I was an intruder, not her son. I set my suitcase down and pressed the video doorbell. A crystal-clear chime echoed inside, nothing like the old brass knocker that used to hang there. I waited, smiling despite my confusion, imagining Mom rushing to the door, wiping flour from her hands, tears already streaming down her face. "Mason, my boy is home." Nothing. I pressed again, holding it longer this time. Silence. The house felt occupied. I could sense movement behind the curtains, but no one came. My smile faded. I rang a 3rd time, a 4th. My voice rose. "Mom, it's Mason. I'm home." Still nothing. The house sat there, silent and hostile, like it was holding its breath. My chest tightened. Was she sick? Hurt? That thought sent ice through my veins. 6 years. 6 years I'd been gone, and what if something had happened and no one told me? I was about to climb the fence when I heard it, the electronic click of the lock disengaging. The door swung open and my world tilted. It wasn't Mom. It was Gavin, my 26-year-old brother. But not the Gavin I remembered, the one who'd dropped out of community college, who'd bounced between dead-end jobs, who I'd last seen hung over on Mom's couch asking me for, "Just $200, bro, I'll pay you back." This Gavin wore a crisp designer polo shirt, his hair styled with product, cologne sharp enough to smell from the gate. He looked like he'd just walked off a yacht. When he saw me, something flickered across his face, shock, maybe fear, before he plastered on a massive grin that showed too many teeth. "Mace! Oh my God, bro!" His voice was too loud, too high-pitched, nothing like his usual lazy drawl. He rushed forward and grabbed me in a crushing hug, slapping my back so hard it stung. "Why didn't you call? Why didn't you text?" I stood stiff in his arms, every instinct screaming that this was wrong. Gavin had never hugged me like this. We weren't that kind of brothers. The last time I'd seen him, we'd fought because he'd borrowed $500 and spent it at a casino. I pulled back, studying his face. "I'm back. But why are you here? Where's Mom?" Gavin's smile didn't waver, but his eyes darted past me to the street like he was checking if I'd come alone. Come in. We'll talk inside. Bree, babe. Mason's home." He grabbed my arm and practically dragged me through the gate. I stepped inside, suitcase wheels scraping the new stone pathway, and froze again. The living room was unrecognizable. The floral couch where Mom used to sit knitting while watching her soap operas, gone. Replaced by a black leather sectional that looked like it cost more than my first car. A massive flat-screen TV dominated one wall, flanked by modern floating shelves displaying abstract art sculptures and designer vases. The walls were painted a cold gray. Everything screamed young couple. Not the warm, cluttered home of a woman who collected porcelain angels and kept photo albums on every surface. "You remodeled?" My voice came out flat. "Isn't it amazing?" A woman's voice, bright and brittle as glass. Brianna emerged from the hallway, Gavin's wife. I'd met her twice, once at their courthouse wedding, once at a tense Christmas dinner before I left. She was 25, blonde, wearing athleisure that probably cost $300. A diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. Her smile was wide and plastic. "Mason, oh my God, you look so different. Gavin talks about you constantly." She air-kissed near my cheek, her perfume overwhelming. I didn't return the greeting. My eyes scanned the room, looking for any trace of my mother. Her knitting basket, her reading glasses, the cross-stitch sampler that said, "Bless this home," that she'd made when I was 8. Nothing. It was like Diana Lancaster had never lived here. "Where's Mom?" I asked again, my voice harder now. Gavin laughed, too loud, and guided me toward the couch. Sit. You want a beer? Water?" "We just got this espresso machine." "Gavin." I didn't sit. "Where is she?" He waved a hand dismissively, already pulling out his phone, scrolling like this was casual. "Oh, Mom? She's around, probably in the kitchen. She's been, helping out with stuff around the house." Helping out. In her own house. The house I bought her. Something dark and cold settled in my gut. I looked at Gavin, at his designer clothes, his styled hair, the Rolex glinting on his wrist, and then at Brianna, at the remodeled home, at the surveillance system that tracked me like an enemy. And I knew with absolute certainty that I had made a terrible mistake leaving my mother alone for 6 years. "Take me to her," I said quietly. "Right now." Gavin's smile flickered. Brianna's hand tightened around her phone. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled taut. "She's busy right now," Brianna said, her voice suddenly clipped. "Maybe you should rest first, Mason. You look exhausted from the flight." I didn't wait for permission. I walked past them, my boots heavy on the polished hardwood floors that used to be worn carpet, heading toward the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Gavin hiss something to Brianna, footsteps scrambling, but I didn't stop. The kitchen door was closed. That was wrong too. Mom always kept it open, said it made the house feel more welcoming. I pushed it open and the smell hit me before my eyes could adjust. Ammonia. Bleach. The sharp chemical bite of industrial cleaning products. And there, on her hands and knees in front of the refrigerator, was my mother. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. It couldn't be her. This woman was too small, too thin, her frame collapsed in on itself like a building missing its support beams. Her hair, which had been a vibrant salt and pepper when I left, hung limp and gray around her face, Her hands, God, her hands were red and raw, the knuckles swollen, scrubbing at a baseboard with a sponge that had seen better days. She was wearing a uniform. A pale blue maid's uniform with a white apron, the kind you'd see in old movies stained with watermarks and grease. On her feet were cheap rubber slippers, cracked at the heels. "Mom?" My voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. She didn't look up, didn't even pause. She just kept scrubbing, muttering something under her breath, her movements mechanical and slow. "Mom, it's me. It's Mason." Nothing. She tilted her head slightly, like she'd heard a distant sound but couldn't place it, then returned to her work. Her lips moved continuously, forming words I had to strain to hear. "Finish the baseboards. Then the windows." Mrs. Brianna said the windows. "Have to finish before dinner." Ice flooded my veins. "Mrs. Brianna." I crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and dropped to my knees beside her. Up close it was worse. Her cheeks were hollow, her skin papery and pale. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. Her hands, the hands that used to braid my hair before school, that used to make Sunday pancakes, were covered in calluses and small cuts, some fresh, some scabbed over. The nails were broken and uneven. "Mom, look at me." I reached out slowly, afraid I might startle her, and gently touched her shoulder. She flinched, actually flinched away from me, her eyes wide and unfocused, pupils dilated like she'd been staring into the sun. When she finally met my gaze, there was no recognition, no spark, just a dazed, cloudy confusion. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice threadbare and trembling. "I'm almost done. I just need to finish the chores. Please don't be angry. I'll be faster tomorrow, I promise." My throat closed. This wasn't my mother. This was a ghost wearing her face, programmed with fear and obedience, the light behind her eyes dimmed to almost nothing. "Diana, what did they do to you?" I breathed. Behind me, Gavin cleared his throat. "Mace, listen, it's not what it looks like." I stood and turned, and whatever he saw in my face made him take a step back. Brianna had appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression caught somewhere between defensive and defiant. "What did you do to her?" Each word came out like a bullet. "She wanted to help out," Brianna said quickly, her voice rising. "We're letting her stay here rent-free, and she offered—" "Rent-free?" The words barely made it past the rage building in my chest. "This is her house. I bought this house for her." Gavin and Brianna exchanged a look, a quick, nervous glance that told me everything I needed to know. They'd done something terrible. And I was about to find out exactly what. What would you do if the family you trusted turned into the wolves at the door? Before we reveal the heartbreaking truth Mason found in that kitchen, welcome to Vindicated Men. If you believe in protecting your family and seeking justice, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We're building a community of men who stand for what's right. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Let's get into the dark secret behind the Lancaster house. I forced myself to take a breath, to push the rage down into something cold and calculating. Gavin was watching me with the nervous energy of a cornered animal, and Brianna had positioned herself near the hallway, ready to bolt if needed. Behind me, Mom continued her whispered mantra about finishing her chores, oblivious to the confrontation happening over her head. "You know what?" I said slowly, deliberately relaxing my shoulders. "You're right. I'm exhausted. The flight was brutal and I'm not thinking straight." I pulled out my phone, making a show of scrolling. "I'm going to get a hotel room for tonight. We can talk tomorrow when everyone's calmer." The relief that washed over Gavin's face was almost comical. Yeah, that's smart. Get some rest." There's a Holiday Inn about 15 minutes from here. I'll figure it out. I looked past him to where Mom was still scrubbing, her movements growing slower, more labored. I'll come back tomorrow morning. We have a lot to discuss. Brianna's smile returned, sharp and triumphant. Of course. We'll make breakfast. It'll be nice to catch up properly. I grabbed my suitcase and walked out without another word, letting the door close behind me with a soft click. I walked to the end of the block, hailed a taxi using my phone and climbed in, making sure Gavin could see me leave from whatever window he was undoubtedly watching from. The taxi took me 3 blocks away. I paid the driver, walked to a car rental place I'd spotted on the way in, and within an hour I was sitting in a nondescript gray sedan with tinted windows, parked across the street from my mother's house, partially obscured by an overgrown hedge. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I watched as lights flicked on inside the house, as shadows moved behind the curtains. I'd spent 6 years trusting lagging video chats where Gavin always conveniently sat Mom in front of a plain white wall, claiming her nerves couldn't handle the bright lights. I thought she was just aging. I never realized he was framing the shot to hide her uniform. I had trusted his assurances that Mom's doing great. What a fool I'd been. At 7:30, the dining room lights blazed on, and I had a clear view through the large bay window Gavin and Brianna apparently hadn't bothered to cover. They sat at a long table, a table I definitely hadn't bought, something modern and expensive looking with a spread that belonged in a restaurant. Steaks, wine in crystal glasses, what looked like lobster tails. Brianna was laughing at something, her head thrown back, while Gavin cut into his meat with the satisfied ease of a man who'd never missed a meal. I waited, my hands gripping the steering wheel, watching for Mom to join them. She didn't. At 8 o'clock, I saw movement through a different window. The kitchen window, smaller, partially fogged. I shifted in my seat, leaning forward, and my stomach turned to stone. Mom shuffled into view, still in that maid's uniform. She was alone. She moved to the counter where a single plate sat. I could see it even from this distance because of how small it was, how pathetically small. She picked at what looked like scraps, leftovers, maybe the edges trimmed from those expensive steaks. She ate standing up, her movements slow and mechanical, and even from across the street I could see her swaying slightly, like standing was an effort. She took 3 bites, then set the plate down and braced herself against the counter, her head bowing. In the dining room, Gavin poured more wine. Brianna checked her phone, smiling at the screen. Neither of them looked toward the kitchen. Neither of them checked on her. I sat in that car until midnight, watching the lights go off one by one. The dining room first, then the living room, the master bedroom light, Mom's bedroom, the one with the windows facing the garden she'd planned to plant, flicked on, and I saw Gavin and Brianna's silhouettes moving around, getting ready for bed in the space that should have been hers. The kitchen light stayed on longest. Through the window I could see Mom's small figure moving slowly, washing dishes, wiping counters, her movements growing more unsteady as exhaustion took hold. When she finally finished and the light went dark, I saw a different light come on, a small one, barely visible in what I remembered as the laundry room. A converted closet space, maybe 8 by 10 feet, where Mom used to keep the washer and dryer and holiday decorations. That's where they had her sleeping. In the laundry room, like hired help, like she was nothing. I started the car and drove to an actual hotel, but I didn't sleep. I sat on the bed with my laptop, searching for lawyers who specialized in elder abuse, filling a notebook with names and numbers and questions that needed answers. By dawn, I had a plan, and Gavin and Brianna had less than 24 hours of freedom left, though they didn't know it yet. I returned to my surveillance spot the next evening, parked in the same location, hidden by the hedge. The lawyers had given me advice. Document everything. Gather evidence, move fast. Elder abuse cases lived or died on proof, and I needed to see exactly what was happening behind those walls before I made my next move. At 6:15, the kitchen light came on. Mom appeared in the window, still in that degrading uniform, starting her evening routine. I watched her pull vegetables from the refrigerator, her movements stiff and pained. Like every motion cost her something. She was preparing their dinner, chopping slowly, pausing every few minutes to steady herself against the counter. Gavin and Brianna were in the living room, visible through the bay window. They were lounging on that leather sectional, watching the massive TV, Brianna's feet propped on Gavin's lap like they were on vacation. Neither of them looked toward the kitchen. Neither of them offered to help. Mom worked for an hour, plating food that looked elaborate, some kind of chicken dish with roasted vegetables. She arranged everything carefully, artfully, then carried the plates to the dining room. I watched her set the table, pour water into glasses, fold napkins. She moved like a trained servant, her head down, shoulders curved inward. When she finished, she turned to leave. But Brianna's voice cut through the air. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Mom's reaction. She flinched, nodded rapidly, and scurried back to the kitchen. Gavin and Brianna ate. Mom returned to the kitchen and began cleaning, scrubbing pots in the sink, her movements growing slower, more labored. She'd pause, brace herself, then continue. Pause, brace, continue. Then it happened. Mom reached for a dish on the top shelf, stretching up on her toes, and her whole body just gave out. She collapsed like someone had cut her strings, crumpling to the tile floor in a heap, her head hitting the cabinet on the way down with a sickening thud I couldn't hear but could imagine. I was out of the car before I knew I'd moved, sprinting across the street. Through the window, I saw Mom lying motionless on the floor, her arm twisted at an awkward angle beneath her. And then I saw Brianna storm into the kitchen. She didn't kneel, didn't check if Mom was breathing. She stood over her, hands on her hips, and I saw her mouth moving, yelling. Mom stirred weakly, trying to push herself up, and Brianna's foot lashed out, connecting with Mom's ribs. Once. Twice. "Stop faking!" The words were muffled through the glass, but I could read her lips. "Get up and finish the dishes." Something inside me snapped. I ran to the back of the house, found the kitchen door, and didn't bother trying the handle. I rammed my shoulder into it with all 6 years of construction site strength behind it. The lock gave way with a crack, the door slamming inward, and I was inside. Brianna shrieked, stumbling backward. Mom was curled on the floor, whimpering, her hands over her head. I dropped to my knees beside her, checking her pulse, rapid but there, and gently touched her face. "I've got you, Mom. I've got you." "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Brianna's voice was shrill, panicked. "You can't just break into my mother's house?" I stood slowly, putting myself between Brianna and Mom. "The house I bought for her? You want to finish that sentence?" Footsteps pounded down the hallway. Gavin burst into the kitchen, his face red. "Mace, you need to calm down. You let her abuse our mother." My voice was deadly quiet now. "You let her work like a slave. You let her starve." Gavin moved toward me, his hands up. "It's not like that. Just listen." He reached for my shoulder, and I reacted on instinct. My fist connected with his jaw, a solid hit that sent him staggering backward into the counter. He came back swinging, catching me in the ribs, and then we were grappling, crashing into the kitchen table, chairs scattering. "Stop! Please stop!" Mom's voice, thin and terrified, cut through the chaos. I shoved Gavin away, breathing hard. He was on the floor, nose bleeding, and Brianna was already on her phone, fingers shaking. "I'm calling the police," she hissed. "Good," I said coldly, pulling out my own phone. "Let's call them together. I'm sure they'll be very interested in the elder abuse happening in this house." The phone slipped from her hand. I didn't wait for the police. I gathered Mom in my arms. She weighed almost nothing, like lifting a child, and carried her to my rental car. Brianna was screaming something about lawsuits, and Gavin was shouting that I was kidnapping her, but I didn't stop. I buckled Mom into the passenger seat, her eyes still unfocused and glassy, and drove straight to Mercy General Hospital. The emergency room nurse took one look at Mom's condition. The bruises forming on her ribs, the hollowed cheeks, the vacant stare, and rushed us into a private examination room. A doctor arrived within minutes, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and efficient hands. "I'm Dr. Patel. Can you tell me what happened?" I explained everything in a rush, finding Mom working as a maid in her own home. The collapse, the abuse, the fact that she didn't seem to recognize me. "Something's wrong with her. She's not herself. It's like she's drugged or something." Dr. Patel's expression shifted, became more focused. She examined Mom carefully, checking her vitals, her pupil response, asking gentle questions that Mom answered in confused whispers. Then she ordered a full blood panel and toxicology screen. "Mr. Lancaster, I'm going to be direct with you. Your mother is severely malnourished, dehydrated, and showing signs of cognitive impairment. We'll know more once we get the lab results back." I stayed with Mom while they ran the tests, holding her hand, watching as nurses hooked her up to an IV for fluids. She drifted in and out of awareness, sometimes looking at me with fleeting recognition, other times asking if she'd finished the windows yet. 2 hours later, Dr. Patel returned with a tablet, her face grim. "Mr. Lancaster, we need to talk. The toxicology report shows extremely high levels of benzodiazepines in your mother's system, specifically lorazepam and diazepam, powerful sedatives. These aren't medications she's prescribed?" My blood ran cold. "No. She doesn't take anything except vitamins." Dr. Patel pulled up a chair, her voice careful and measured. "Based on the concentration levels, your mother has been receiving these drugs regularly for an extended period. Months, possibly longer. These are what we sometimes call chemical restraints. In appropriate medical doses, they treat anxiety. In high doses administered long-term, they cause exactly what you're describing: cognitive fog, memory impairment, docility, confusion." "Docility," I repeated, the word tasting like poison. "You mean they drugged her to make her compliant?" "That would be the effect, yes. Benzodiazepines at these levels would make someone highly suggestible, unable to resist commands and too disoriented to question their circumstances. The memory loss would be significant. She might not remember days or weeks at a time." Dr. Patel's jaw tightened. "Mr. Lancaster, this is chemical abuse. This is a crime." I looked at Mom, sleeping fitfully in the hospital bed, and understood with sickening clarity what Gavin and Brianna had done. They hadn't just stolen her house and forced her into servitude. They'd stolen her mind. They'd turned her into a ghost, chemically lobotomized, unable to fight back or even understand that she should. If you think Gavin and Brianna deserve everything that's coming to them, drop a justice in the comments right now. Your engagement helps us reach more people and share these stories of resilience. Make sure you're subscribed to Vindicated Men so you never miss a moment of this investigation. Now, let's see how Mason plans to take back what's his. How long until it's out of her system? We're flushing her system now with IV fluids. The acute effects should diminish over the next 48 to 72 hours, but there may be lasting cognitive effects depending on how long she's been dosed. Some patients recover fully. Others... She trailed off, but I understood. "I need copies of these results. All of them." Dr. Patel nodded. "I'm also filing a mandatory report with Adult Protective Services and local police. This is elder abuse, and we're required by law to report it. You should consult with an attorney immediately. I already had 3 on speed dial. Do whatever you need to do, just help her. After Dr. Patel left, I sat beside Mom's bed and watched her sleep, her breathing finally steady, her face peaceful for the first time since I'd found her. I thought about those video calls over the past 6 years, the ones where Gavin always had an excuse for why Mom couldn't come to the phone or why she seemed tired when she did. I thought about the monthly transfers of $2,000, money that should have made her life easier. They'd been drugging her, stealing from her, working her like a slave in her own home. And I'd been halfway across the world, blind to it all, thinking I was being a good son by sending money. I pulled out my phone and called the first lawyer on my list. It was time to make sure Gavin and Brianna paid for every single thing they'd done. The lawyer I hired, Catherine Reeves, was a specialist in elder law and financial exploitation. She arrived at the hospital the next morning with a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former detective with 30 years on the force. Mom was still sleeping off the sedatives, her vitals improving, but her mind still clouded. "Mr. Lancaster, we need to establish a timeline and paper trail," Catherine said, setting her briefcase on the visitor's table. "If your brother has been living in that house and claiming ownership, there's documentation somewhere. We need to find it." Marcus pulled out a tablet. "I've already started digging. Your mother's house, the property at 847 Maple Grove Lane, was purchased 6 years ago in her name. Diana Lancaster, correct?" "Yes. I wired the down payment from Germany and set up the mortgage payments from my account. Everything was supposed to be in her name." Marcus tapped the screen, his expression darkening. 3 months ago, there was a property transfer filed with the county recorder's office. Diana Lancaster signed over full ownership to Gavin Lancaster via quitclaim deed. No money exchanged, listed as a family gift. The room tilted. "That's impossible. She would never—" "We know," Catherine interrupted gently. "That's why we're here. Marcus, show him the documents." Marcus turned the tablet toward me. There it was, official county records, stamps and seals making it look legitimate. And there, at the bottom, was Mom's signature. Except it wasn't. Not really. The handwriting was a trembling, unsteady scrawl that barely resembled her neat, careful cursive. The letters were malformed, some trailing off the line entirely, like whoever signed it could barely hold the pen. "This was signed by someone who was heavily impaired," Marcus said. "I've seen signatures like this before. Stroke victims, people with severe tremors, and people who were drugged. Given what the hospital found in her system, I'd bet my pension on the latter." Catherine leaned forward. "There's more. Along with the property transfer, there's a durable power of attorney document filed the same day, also supposedly signed by Diana, giving Gavin complete control over her finances and medical decisions. Same shaky signature." I stared at the documents, rage building in my chest like a pressure cooker. They drugged her and made her sign away everything. "That's exactly what they did," Catherine confirmed. "And here's the critical piece. These documents were notarized. There's a notary seal right here from a Linda Chen at QuickSign Notary Services. Either this notary was complicit or your brother forged the seal as well." Marcus made a note. "I'll track down Linda Chen by tomorrow. If she's legitimate, we'll need her testimony that she never saw Diana sign these documents in a sound state of mind. If she's fake or paid off, that's fraud on top of everything else." I looked at Mom, still sleeping, still victim to what they'd done to her even now. 3 months ago. That's when this started? Based on the documents, yes, but the drugging likely started earlier, weeks or months before, to get her compliant enough to sign. Catherine pulled out more papers. "I'm filing for emergency guardianship for you over your mother, and we're going to petition the court to void these transfers based on undue influence and incapacity. The toxicology report is our smoking gun." What about criminal charges? Adult Protective Services opened a case last night when the hospital filed their report. With these documents and the medical evidence, we're looking at elder abuse, fraud, forgery, possibly identity theft, and unlawful administration of controlled substances. That's serious prison time. Catherine's voice was steel. Your brother and his wife are going to pay for this, Mr. Lancaster. I promise you that. Marcus stood, pocketing his tablet. I'll have a full forensic report on these documents by end of week. Ink analysis, pressure points, timeline verification. We're building an airtight case. After they left, I sat with Mom and waited for her to wake up. When she finally did, her eyes were clearer, more present. She looked at me, really looked, and whispered, Mason, is that really you? I took her hand. Yeah, Mom. It's really me. And I'm not leaving again. They showed up on the third day when Mom was finally lucid enough to sit up and eat solid food. I was feeding her soup when I heard the commotion in the hallway. They had lied to the front desk, claiming they were there to sign legal release forms and had pushed past the nurses before a security alert could even be triggered. I could hear Brianna's voice, high and pleading, arguing with the staff about visiting hours. Please, we just need 5 minutes. That's my husband's mother in there. I stood ready to throw them out myself, but Mom's hand caught my wrist. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were suddenly alert, panicked. Mason, wait, let them in. Mom, after what they... Please, her voice cracked. I need to see him. Against every instinct screaming at me, I opened the door. Gavin and Brianna stood there and I barely recognized them. Gavin's face was puffy and red, eyes bloodshot like he'd been crying for days. Brianna's makeup was smeared, her designer clothes wrinkled. They looked broken. Mason. Gavin's voice was a rasp. Please, we need to talk. I stepped aside, letting them in but positioning myself between them and Mom's bed. Gavin took 3 steps and collapsed to his knees, his whole body shaking with sobs. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The words tumbled out between gasps. The underground gambling debts, the high-interest private loans, we were drowning. Your $2,000 a month barely covered the interest payments on the lifestyle Brianna demanded. We were about to lose everything. I didn't know what else to do. Brianna was crying too, mascara tracking down her cheeks. It was my fault. I pushed him. I kept spending, kept wanting more, and when the bills came, we panicked. We never meant for it to go this far. You drugged her, I said coldly. You made her a slave in her own home. I know. Gavin looked up at me, his face wrecked with desperation. I know what we did. I hate myself for it. But Mason, if we go to prison, our lives are over. 20 years, that's what the lawyer said. Please, there has to be another way. Mom made a small sound, and I turned to see tears streaming down her face. Gavin, baby, look at me. He crawled to her bedside, reaching for her hand, and I wanted to rip him away, but Mom held on. What you did was wrong, she whispered, her voice thin but steady. So wrong, but you're my son, my baby boy. Mom, don't, I warned. I could see where this was going. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Mason, I can't send him to prison. He's my child. He poisoned you. He beat you down until you didn't know your own name. I know. Fresh tears spilled over. But he's still mine. Please, Mason, just take the house back. Make them give everything back and let them go, please. The room was silent except for Gavin's sobbing and Mom's labored breathing. Every cell in my body screamed to refuse, to let the justice system crush them the way they'd crushed her. But Mom was looking at me with those eyes, the same eyes that used to comfort me after Dad died, that used to tell me everything would be okay. You sign everything back, I said finally, my voice like gravel. The house, the power of attorney, all of it. You put it in writing, notarized properly, and you disappear from our lives forever. You never contact Mom again. Ever. Gavin nodded frantically. Yes, anything. We'll sign whatever you want. And if I ever see you near her again, deal's off. I'll make sure you both rot. Catherine was furious when I called her, but she drew up the papers. Within 48 hours, the house was back in Mom's name. The power of attorney voided, and Gavin and Brianna had signed confessions in exchange for dropped charges. Mom squeezed my hand as I loaded her into the car to take her home. Thank you for understanding. I didn't have the heart to tell her I didn't understand at all. I'd just given mercy to people who deserved none, and I could only hope I wouldn't regret it. I had no idea how much I'd regret it. Mom spent 5 days in the hospital recovering while I arranged everything for her return. I hired cleaners to scrub the house top to bottom, ordered new furniture to replace the gaudy pieces Gavin and Brianna had bought, and even picked out fresh flowers for the kitchen table. I wanted her to come home to a space that felt like hers again, not a crime scene. On the 6th day, I loaded Mom into the rental car with her small bag of belongings. The hospital had given her new clothes since the maid's uniform had been thrown away, and drove toward Maple Grove Lane. She was quiet during the drive, staring out the window, her hands folded in her lap. You okay, Mom? I keep thinking I should feel relieved, she said softly, but I just feel empty. That's normal. It'll take time. I turned onto her street, already mentally planning how I'd spend the next few weeks helping her settle in. Maybe finding a therapist who specialized in trauma. I'd already emailed my contacts in Germany telling them I wouldn't be taking any more overseas contracts. Mom needed me here and I wasn't leaving again. But as the house came into view, my foot hit the brake so hard the car lurched. Mason, what's wrong? I couldn't speak, couldn't process what I was seeing. A massive red and white sold sign stood in the front yard, the kind developers used for quick cash sales. A moving truck was backed into the driveway, and 2 workers were loading the last of the furniture. My mother's furniture that I'd just had delivered 3 days ago. The surveillance cameras were gone. The steel gate stood open, swinging slightly in the breeze. I threw the car into park and ran toward the house, Mom calling after me. A man in a suit stood on the front porch with a clipboard, talking on his phone. He looked up as I approached, his expression puzzled. Can I help you? What the hell is going on? This is my mother's house. The man's eyebrows rose. Sir, this property was sold 4 days ago to a predatory cash-for-houses shell company. They specialize in blind closings and immediate possession. They didn't even do an inspection, they just wanted the land for a high-rise. If you have a dispute, you'll need to contact. 4 days ago? My blood ran cold. 4 days ago was the day after the settlement, the 48-hour window between when Gavin and Brianna signed the house back over to Mom and when the paperwork was officially filed with the county. They'd sold it. In that narrow gap, they'd somehow sold Mom's house out from under us and taken the cash. I pushed past the man and ran inside. The house was empty, completely gutted. Even the new furniture I'd ordered was gone. They must have sold it along with everything else. The walls echoed with my footsteps as I checked room after room, finding nothing but bare floors and the faint smell of cleaning products. In the kitchen, I found a single envelope taped to the counter, my name scrawled across it in Gavin's handwriting. Inside was a note. Sorry, bro, we needed a fresh start. The buyer paid cash at a 40% discount just to move the title instantly. We used a shady digital notary to bypass the county wait time. We're gone. Don't look for us. I stood there, the paper crumpling in my fist as the magnitude of their betrayal crashed over me. We'd shown them mercy. Mom had begged me to let them go, to give them a second chance, and they'd responded by committing one final, unforgivable theft. I walked back outside where Mom sat in the car, her face pressed against the window, tears streaming silently down her cheeks as she stared at the sold sign. I pulled out my phone and called Catherine Reeves. "They're done," I said when she answered. "No more mercy. I want them in prison for the rest of their lives." Catherine moved faster than I thought possible. Within hours of my call, she'd contacted the district attorney, Adult Protective Services, and the fraud division of the state police. The signed confessions Gavin and Brianna had provided, the ones we'd used for the settlement, became the foundation of a criminal case they couldn't escape. The forged sale of the house was the final piece prosecutors needed. They'd used Mom's newly restored power of attorney documents that weren't even officially filed yet, to fraudulently sell the property to Redwood Development for $370,000 in cash. The developer was legitimate, had no idea the title was compromised, but the transaction was void the moment the fraud was discovered. The manhunt lasted 6 days. Gavin and Brianna had made it as far as the Arizona border, driving a brand new BMW they'd bought with the stolen cash, staying in luxury hotels, living like they'd won the lottery. State police found them at a checkpoint outside Tucson, the trunk of their car still loaded with nearly $200,000 in bundled bills they hadn't managed to spend yet. The trial was swift. Between the toxicology reports, the forged documents, Marcus's forensic analysis, the fraudulent property sale, and their own signed confessions, the prosecution built a case so airtight their public defender advised them to plead guilty. The judge showed no mercy where I had. 23 years for Gavin, 25 for Brianna, who'd been the one physically abusing Mom. Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, grand theft, illegal administration of controlled substances. The sentences would run consecutively. They'd be in their 50s before they saw freedom again. Mom cried when she heard the verdict, but she didn't ask me to intervene this time. Some betrayals were too deep for even a mother's love to excuse. With the fraudulent sale voided and the recovered cash returned, I made a decision. I sold the house on Maple Grove Lane legitimately to a young family with 2 kids who promised to love it. Mom didn't want to go back there anyway. Too many ghosts, too many memories of scrubbing floors and sleeping in the laundry room. Instead, I found us a small house 3 hours north, nestled in the mountains where the air was clean and the only noise was wind through pine trees. It was simple. 2 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a kitchen with windows that overlooked a valley where deer came to graze at dawn. I set up bird feeders and Mom spent her mornings watching cardinals and blue jays, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling, always healing. I took a job with a local engineering firm, nothing glamorous, half the pay I'd made in Germany. But I came home every night at 6. I cooked dinner with Mom. We sat on the porch and talked about Dad, about the years I'd missed, about nothing and everything. The only cameras on our property were the ones I mounted near the feeders so Mom could watch the birds on cloudy days when she didn't want to go outside. One evening, 6 months after we'd moved in, Mom took my hand as we watched the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "You gave up so much to stay here with me," she said quietly. I squeezed her hand. "I didn't give up anything, Mom. I just finally figured out what actually mattered." She smiled, really smiled, for the first time since I'd come home. And in that moment, I understood what I'd been too young and too foolish to know 6 years ago. Presence wasn't just a gift you gave someone. It was the only currency that ever really counted. Mason finally found peace, but it cost him a brother and a home. True strength isn't just about the size of your paycheck. It's about the depth of your protection. If this story moved you, please give it a like and share it with your circle. We want to hear from you. What would you have done if you found that sold sign in the yard? Comment your thoughts below. Thank you for being part of Vindicated Men. Subscribe for more stories of truth, honor, and redemption. We'll see you in the next one.